What if the most powerful agency in America got a warning that could have saved a life, then buried it? The story opens not with noise, but with absence. The absence of honesty in America's most powerful institutions. A creeping silence has begun to replace truth. The agencies once trusted to protect citizens now seem more interested in shielding themselves from accountability. It feels like a slow erosion, but Charlie Kirk's death rips the curtain away, revealing that silence isn't just a mistake, it's a strategy. His assassination doesn't just shatter lives, it fractures trust. A man known for speaking out in arenas built for debate and democracy is cut down in a place meant to celebrate free speech. The headlines call it a tragedy. Politicians rush to issue condolences. But beneath the noise of official statements, one question grows louder in the public's mind. Why was he left so vulnerable? The silence becomes the real enemy. Not the shooter, not the chaos of politics, but the deliberate quiet of those who knew, who could have acted, but didn't. It's this silence that Jasmine Crockett will drag into the light. And it's this silence that Director Patel will spend every ounce of his power trying to defend. 2 days before the fatal event, a red flag was raised. Security analysts identified glaring vulnerabilities at the venue. A tent with exposed angles, rooftops offering clear sight lines, and no meaningful cover for the speaker. The warning was blunt, not abstract. It carried names, dates, and risk levels. That warning was sent directly to local law enforcement and to the FBI. Inside the FBI's Washington field office, the file didn't vanish into thin air. It was received, reviewed, and then quietly downgraded. What began as a priority alert was reclassified, then archived, as if the threat were trivial. No follow-up, no urgent call to tighten security. Just silence. When Kirk was killed on stage, the silence of those days before became louder than the gunshots themselves. What did the FBI know? Why didn't they act? Patel, the director, would later call the tragedy unforeseen. But Crockett unearthed the digital fingerprints proving otherwise. The warning wasn't missed, it was ignored. That single ignored alert transformed the tragedy into a scandal. Because if a threat was known, logged, and then deliberately buried, Kirk's death wasn't just an act of violence. It was the result of a choice to remain silent. And silence, in this case, was deadly. When the cameras turned on, Director Patel appeared every inch the unshakable leader. His posture was straight, his voice steady, his words chosen with surgical precision. To the casual viewer, he looked calm, confident, the face of control in a moment of national chaos. He repeated the script. The FBI was investigating. The nation should trust the process, and it was too early to draw conclusions. But beneath the surface, cracks were already showing. Patel's mask of calm wasn't built on truth, but on silence. Each vague phrase, ongoing investigation, premature to speculate, maintaining integrity, became a shield, deflecting questions while revealing nothing. The longer he spoke, the more obvious it became. This wasn't leadership, it was damage control. Enter Jasmine Crockett. She didn't match Patel's calm with anger. She cut through it with precision. Her tone was steady, her questions sharp. Where Patel relied on platitudes, she demanded specifics. Where he leaned on authority, she leaned on evidence. Slowly, Patel's composure began to falter. A hand twitch here, a forced smile there. His answers, once polished, grew defensive. The mask was slipping. Patel wanted the nation to see a man in control. But what they saw instead was a man cornered, clinging to silence as his last refuge. And Crockett was just getting started. Crockett's first weapon wasn't rhetoric. It was raw data. She came armed with a printout of digital logs, the kind of cold, unfeeling timestamps that don't bend to narrative. In front of the cameras, she laid them down one by one. September 7th, 10:42 p.m. Report received by FBI Washington Field Office. September 8th, 1:13 a.m. File reviewed. September 8th, 2:24 a.m. Status changed from priority to archive. September 8th, 9:16 a.m. Metadata altered to erase the original priority designation. The numbers told a story more damning than any speech. A warning wasn't missed. It was downgraded deliberately and then hidden. Crockett didn't need adjectives or outrage. The timestamps spoke for themselves. Patel tried to deflect. He called the logs technical, warned against misinterpretation, and urged patience until the investigation was complete. But patience was no longer an option. Outside the chamber, the crowd watching the live stream had already turned Patel's defense into a chant. Machines don't lie, people do. Every second of silence Patel gave in response to Crockett's yes or no questions only deepened the impression of guilt. His refusal to deny the logs was louder than an admission. In that moment, the metadata became the first strike, shattering Patel's calm mask and proving that silence, once again, was not neutrality. It was complicity. Just as Patel struggled to explain away the altered logs, Crockett reached for her next weapon. Receipts, literally. She slid a slim envelope across the table, revealing courier records. Packages signed for by Patel's office only weeks before Charlie Kirk's death. At first glance, they looked ordinary. But then came the details. The sender's name was concealed. The declared value box was left blank. Crockett's questions were surgical. Why weren't these gifts disclosed? Why were they accepted by your office? Why do they trace back to a partisan donor network under investigation? Patel dismissed them as routine tokens of appreciation, the kind of ceremonial gifts federal officials receive all the time. But Crockett pounced. If they were routine, why weren't they logged in the Bureau's mandatory disclosure reports? Why hide them at all? The chamber grew tense. Reporters scribbled. The crowd outside erupted with a new chant. No more gifts. No more silence. The optics were brutal. Patel, once calm and untouchable, now looked cornered. A man trying to explain away packages that smelled of influence. Crockett, meanwhile, looked steady, unshaken, almost surgical. The gifts weren't just objects. They were evidence of ties, proof that silence might not be incompetence but allegiance. And in that moment, the question shifted. Was Patel protecting the Bureau, or was he protecting Trump's network? If the hidden gifts hinted at influence, the ledger made it undeniable. Crockett pulled out a thick stack of documents, bank transfers, audit reports, foundation records. The kind of dry paperwork most people would skim over. But when pieced together, it painted a story sharper than any headline. The trail began small. Modest donations flowing through a Delaware-based foundation. Then larger sums appeared, masked under vague labels like consulting fees and outreach. Finally, one transaction leapt off the page. $250,000 wired to a private security contractor. The name of that contractor? The very firm hired to manage security at the event where Charlie Kirk was killed. Gasps rippled through the hearing room. Reporters stopped scribbling and looked up. The crowd outside roared into a new chant. Follow the money! Follow the money! Patel scrambled, calling the documents unverified, cautioning against premature conclusions. But Crockett was ready. She held up the ledger with bold red stamps, verified by independent auditors, complete with matching bank seals and timestamps. The picture was clear. Money flowed from the donor network that sent Patel undisclosed gifts straight into the hands of the security contractor responsible for the vulnerabilities that got Charlie Kirk killed. This wasn't negligence. It was a system of transactions, influence, and silence, each piece tied together by a money trail Patel could not explain away. In that moment, the scandal wasn't just about ignored warnings or hidden gifts. It was about complicity paid for in dollars, logged in ledgers, and confirmed by bank stamps. And the more Patel tried to deny it, the more the silence around him became deafening. By this point, Patel's once steady composure had shattered. The calm mask he wore at the start of the hearing was gone, replaced by flashes of irritation, defensiveness, and barely concealed anger. Each new piece of evidence Crockett dropped, the ignored warnings, the altered logs, the hidden gifts, the money trail, chipped away at his authority. His voice, once measured, grew sharp and impatient. He accused Crockett of turning the hearing into political theater. He insisted the FBI's integrity was being smeared. But the louder he spoke, the weaker he appeared. On live television, the director of the FBI was no longer the steady hand guiding an investigation. He was a cornered man, struggling to control the narrative. Inside the chamber, silence weighed heavy as Patel dodged yes or no questions. Outside, the crowd watching on big screens turned his deflections into chants. No Barry! No Barry! Receipts don't lie! Follow the money! Even lawmakers who once sat silently now shifted uncomfortably, their faces betraying doubt. Patel's authority wasn't just slipping, it was collapsing in real time. Each refusal to answer became an answer. Each attempt at deflection fueled outrage. Crockett didn't need to raise her voice. She simply let his evasions hang in the air, 6 seconds at a time, until the silence itself condemned him. The director of the FBI, the man sworn to defend truth, was unraveling under the weight of receipts, ledgers, and chants echoing beyond the chamber walls. Patel's authority wasn't just damaged. It was gone, and everyone watching knew it. What began as a tense congressional hearing started to feel almost unreal. A collision of politics, protest, and raw evidence unfolding in real time. Inside the chamber, Crockett stacked her documents like a trial attorney. Metadata logs, courier receipts, financial ledgers. Each one was undeniable on its own. But together they created a narrative Patel couldn't escape. Outside, thousands gathered with signs, megaphones, and screens streaming the hearing live. Every phrase Patel uttered, every silence he let linger, was instantly transformed into chants. Machines don't lie, people do. No more gifts, no more silence. Follow the money. The line between the hearing room and the street blurred. Protesters repeated Crockett's words almost in sync with her questions. Reporters tweeted the evidence faster than Patel's aides could issue denials. Screenshots of the logs and ledgers spread across social media, archived by the public before the FBI could spin them. It felt less like a controlled investigation and more like a public trial. Patel in the defendant's chair, Crockett as the prosecutor, and the people as the jury. Every chant outside echoed back into the chamber, rattling the walls and amplifying the pressure. The surreal part wasn't just the noise, it was the clarity. For once, there were no hidden transcripts, no delayed leaks. The truth wasn't trickling out through anonymous sources. It was exploding live, in front of the world, impossible to contain. Patel had entered the hearing as a man in control. Now he sat surrounded by chants, screens, and receipts, caught in a storm that felt less like politics and more like history being written in real time. Just when it seemed Crockett had laid every card on the table, the warnings, the logs, the gifts, the money trail, she reached for one last piece. It wasn't paper this time. It wasn't numbers or metadata. It was something heavier, undeniable, something even Patel couldn't dismiss as technical or premature. She produced a physical item, a package recovered from the very donor network that had funded the hidden gifts. Inside, cameras caught what Patel had most to fear: a signed acknowledgement slip bearing his office's seal, his assistant's signature, and a timestamp that lined up exactly with the ledger entries already exposed. The room fell into silence. This wasn't theory, this wasn't interpretation. This was material proof tying Patel's office directly to the network at the center of the scandal. Patel froze. For a man who had filled the room with words only hours earlier, he suddenly had none. His lips tightened, his eyes dropped, his hands pressed against the table as though to hold himself steady. The director of the FBI, live on television, could not deny the evidence in front of him without calling his own office a liar. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Director Patel," she said, calm and clear. "Silence is not an answer. This isn't my evidence. It's yours. The people already have it." The crowd outside erupted, their chants now unified into one deafening roar. No more silence. No more silence. In that moment, Patel's shield, his calm, his authority, his deflections, shattered completely. The final evidence wasn't just a document or a log. It was a symbol, a physical object that proved what millions were already chanting. Silence was never neutrality. It was complicity. The chamber had already erupted. The final slip with Patel's seal lay in plain view. The chants outside thundered like waves against stone. But Crockett didn't let the moment rest. She leaned forward, her voice steady, deliberate, the weight of the night distilled into a single truth. "This hearing was never about Director Patel alone," she said. "It was never only about one ledger, one memo, or even one tragedy. This is about whether truth belongs to the people, or whether silence belongs to the powerful. That is the only question that matters." The room stilled. Lawmakers leaned back in their chairs. Reporters paused, pens frozen in midair. Patel sat slumped, pale, broken by the receipts stacked against him. Yet the focus had already shifted beyond him. Because Crockett was right. The scandal had cracked open something larger. Not just one man's corruption, but an entire system built on silence. The memo marked acceptable risk was no longer only about Kirk's death. It was about every warning ignored, every report buried, every life dismissed as expendable in service of profit or power. And the people knew it. Across the nation, vigils had already turned into marches. Hashtags had turned into movements. Families who had never stood in protest before now held signs that read, "Truth keeps us safe." Students who had never spoken out now filled plazas chanting, "Silence is complicity." Patel's collapse was only the spark. The fire that followed was the people's that as the chants shook the chamber, Crockett closed with words that would replay for decades. "History will not remember the silence of the powerful. It will remember the courage of the people who refused to be silent." And tonight, America refused. The gavel fell. The hearing adjourned. But the bigger question, who truly owns the truth, had already been answered.